Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we get to talk about a Michigan game today. Michigan's 9-1, and just saw a great quote from our buddy Mark Coons. He's watching the Jim Harbaugh press conference and says, Harbaugh says the biggest winner in Happy Valley last Saturday was the game of football. I suppose that's true for a very specific definition of the game of football, but I don't know. I mean, was that the most aesthetically pleasing football game you've watched all season? I don't think I can say that it was for me.
No, not necessarily. I mean, I was hoping you were going to say, who really won, and Harbaugh was going to say the fans. The fans in the stadium were the real winners as they watched Michigan win 21-17 with a little fourth quarter I guess technically a comeback, even though they led all game long, but they did come back in that fourth quarter, which we'll get to give them credit because I don't think that necessarily happens every single year for Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. So that was something that they did accomplish and should be widely lauded for. And that's what, Tom, if nothing else, that's what this Michigan Monday podcast, that has been our design for this show since its inception this season, which is to share the greatness and spread the awareness of Jim Harbaugh. And that's what we're here for. And that's what we're going to do. And kudos to him. He was very happy after the game and in the press conferences, if everybody saw that, and really just all about, man, how about this team? How about them Wolverines? How about Michigan football? And it was good to see, because in the past games on the road against ranked opponents, not that Penn State was ranked, of course, but in like AP ranked, he would be like coming off of a loss, and it would be more like, how about those Wolverines? And now he's so much happier.
Yeah, and that's a place that they have not had a tremendous amount of success. They lost in 2019 when they were there. That was the game where Ronnie Bell had the drop in the end zone. They lost by a touchdown. 2017, they just got destroyed there. 42-13. So, that's a good win. That's a good win on the road. And, you outcoach James Franklin in the final moments of a close game. I mean, that's, put that one on your resume. But no, I mean, I think this Michigan team I'm still not to the point where I think this Michigan team is 50-50 to beat Ohio State. But I think we're to the point where they keep doing it. And eventually, like, you win enough close-ish games. It's like, okay, at some point the luck probably does run out, but you stack enough of these on top of each other. It's like, okay, this is a good Michigan team. And I think we've been kind of to that point for a while now. I think this is still a flawed Michigan team. I think there's, there are some things on this Michigan team that I would like to, I am really, I think this is about the third or fourth week in a row that I've talked about how much I'm looking forward to watching David Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson going against like actual offensive tackles and not Penn State's turnstiles. But this is a good Michigan team. This is a Michigan team that is not an elite team, but in a year when there are only like 3 elite teams, they're probably in that next group right below the top maybe 3 or so.
Yeah, and I guess I don't see Michigan being able to beat one of those elite teams. And I guess in like 11 days or whatever, we'll find out if Ohio State is one of those elite teams, because if I say I don't think Michigan can beat an elite team and then they beat Ohio State, therefore Ohio State is not elite. And, however that may happen. But yeah, this was a really good win because it doesn't normally happen for them. And they could have just given up at the end. And maybe if this was a night game in September or October, maybe that's how it happens. But this not being the whiteout environment, it was still a tough place to go in and play, and they set the tone. They didn't allow much running game, although a little bit more than I thought they would, but still they held Penn State to 109 yards rushing, 2.6 yards per carry. Yeah, that's going to be enough to win. And the passing game, 43 attempts, 205 yards from Sean Clifford. Again, all of that is good enough. What kind of makes that almost not good enough is the lack of offense from Michigan, where again, 144 yards rushing. That's that's okay. 3.5 yards per carry. And you had Hassan Haskins go 31 for 156, 5 yards a carry, doing what he does. Had a handful of like 12-yard carries and like a 17-yard carry, but a lot of nothing in between. It's not as consistent as it could be. And when we saw him get stuffed on a 4th and 2, the passing game, Cade McNamara, 19 of 29 for 217 yards, with 48 of those yards coming on their last pass to Eric All to win the game. A pass that went 0 yards downfield, and then Eric All took it the other 48. And without that, you're talking like 60 yards, 170 yards passing through almost all 4 quarters. And there's not a lot of offense there, just enough defense. And again, I think this is where Michigan has been the beneficiary of they are the beneficiary of the stuff they create with the pass rush. But the Penn State offensive line was not equipped. And you saw there's one play where David Ajabo came on unblocked, and the center is yelling at somebody, and the left tackle just immediately went inside, and I don't know who was supposed to pick up Ojabo on that one. Nobody did. And the lack of communication, in addition to the lack of skill on the edges for Penn State, essentially doomed them. But they still did get some yards and still did fight back a little.
Yeah, and the Penn State rushing game, and you talked about the top line number being 2.6. There were 7 sacks in that game. Michigan had 7 sacks for 65 yards. So the sack adjusted rushing total for Penn State was, basically 5 yards a carry, 4.97 yards a carry, sack adjusted, which is 174 yards on 35 carries. Now, if Penn State's running for 5 yards on your carry on your defense, the sacks count. But if they're able to run the ball 5 yards a carry on your defense, that's a little concerning, because guess who has a better running back than Penn State does? Ohio State. Guess who has a better offensive line than Penn State does? Ohio State. And if Ohio State can run for 5 yards a carry, that's not great for Michigan, because that's going to help keep that defensive line off balance, where they are not in predictable passing situations. And, that probably slows the pass rush down a little bit. You've got better tackles out there. There's a lot there that's Michigan looks good right now. Michigan has still not played a team, I think, in the same zip code as Ohio State talent-wise. Michigan State is a good team, but just talent-wise out there, it's not, and that's not to say Michigan State couldn't beat Ohio State, but just pure talent at the skill positions on offense. Just to take one example, not close. That is not a close thing for Michigan State and Ohio State. So I do think that this Michigan team has been getting better throughout the year in a lot of ways, but you still see a lot of those same there's the same things that I think we've been talking about all year as kind of concerns still haven't really been resolved. I mean, Cade McNamara is still not really throwing the ball down the field at all. Blake Corum was out again this week, which, Hassan Haskins had a very nice day, 31 carries, 156 yards, 5 yards a carry. That's good. That's very good. But, he's the one guy. They very clearly don't trust Donovan Edwards right now. He only had 2 carries on Saturday. So if you don't have Corum, you've only got one back. They also didn't play J.J. McCarthy. That was a little weird to me as well. Harbaugh on Monday made it sound like that was just kind of a coaching decision and not a health issue, I guess. So that was interesting to me, that, maybe J.J. McCarthy is also in that. We don't quite trust him yet in a really close, big spot.
Yeah, that was my take on that the game was never at a point where every single yard, every single point was valuable. And so they didn't want to risk anything there. And what he showed last, what was it, 2 fumbles in the last game, or that was the Michigan State game where, you just can't have that right now. I did find it interesting. Sean Clifford averaged about 7 yards a carry when you eliminate the 7 sacks. He was an effective runner. I don't know how much Ohio State is going to use that same sort of offense, but there were some wide lanes as the defense would go and get spread out before the snap. Kayvon Lee, 88 yards rushing on 20 carries. I'm just going to assume that's his best performance of the year. I could, obviously I could look right now, but you don't normally see that from him. because they don't average much more than 88 yards rushing this season. So, 174 yards rushing, sack adjusted. That's too much against this Penn State offense. But as long as you get it all back, and then of course the fake field goal that lost 18 yards on the ground as well. Tom, I know this is a Michigan Monday podcast, but it could probably also be a Penn State Monday podcast based on James Franklin. And yeah, congratulations, Jim Harbaugh. You outcoached James Franklin in the fourth quarter, but that's essentially, Tom, the free space on the bingo card.
James Franklin is just a mystery wrapped inside an enigma, wrapped inside some poorly timed timeouts, wrapped inside some poor fourth down. It's just like, man, what are we doing here? Like he had that fake punt on the first drive, which was history's most predictable fake punt. Like Michigan called a timeout to line up specifically because it's like, this is going to be a fake punt. Like it was, this is like a coach youth softball, and it's like, it takes about 3 seconds to figure out the other team's steal sign, because it's not, it's not like the 17 signs and the indicator is the second time I touch my belt buckle. It's the third sign. It's like, okay, if the coach takes off his hat and runs his hand through his hair, they're going to be stealing. So you tell your catcher, hey, be ready. I think they're going to steal. That was essentially this call for Penn State. It was like, okay, James Franklin is making the kicking motion, but shaking his head no. That was this call. Like, I wonder what that means. It could be literally anything. I don't know. Michigan was ready for it. They went for it. They went for it anyway. And it worked because the guy just kind of got open behind the defender. But then later had the dumbest fake field goal in history, where it's like 4th and goal from the 2. Like, you have skill talent. Like, let your offensive players who do this for a living make the play. You have Jahan Dotson, you have Parker Washington, you've got Sean Clifford, who can maybe get out there and run and do it with his legs. Like, let one of them do it. And it's like, no. We have a kicker. He's our secret weapon. It's a kicker, and we're going to put him out in space. And as long as there's no one out there, he has a chance to score. Like, nope, that was not a good choice. I really am not trying to be mean to James Franklin, but holy Moses, it's like, how many times in a row do you have to just botch one of these games where it's just like, all you have to do is not screw it up? It's like, no, it's entirely too much. So yeah, I have issues with James Franklin. I am deeply curious why USC or LSU is supposed to be extremely interested in James Franklin. I suspect Penn State fans would, at this point, like, happily drive him to the airport and bon voyage, please. Enjoy Los Angeles. Enjoy one of the LAs, whether it's Los Angeles or Louisiana. Have fun. No. We don't need a buyout. It's fine. Everything's good. You enjoy yourself. We want you to have fun. But yeah, I mean, there are times in the past when Jim Harbaugh would have lost that game, and like, outcoaching James Franklin at the end of the game is not the most difficult thing you're going to do, but Jim Harbaugh outcoached James Franklin at the end of the game. That's what you're supposed to do, and he did it. So they do deserve credit for that.
Yeah, Penn State fans, they're like, no, please don't go. Please stay. We'll miss you. Yeah, and then they go, and credit to the players for executing, for the Michigan players, that Michigan gets the lead, or Penn State takes the lead 17-14 with just under 6 minutes left. They run it 5 times with Hassan Haskins, and then they throw the deep strike to Eric All for the game winner, and then they immediately get after Sean Clifford on that final drive, and still 4th and 2. They throw like a 20-yard fade down the left sideline when the drive before, the drive where they won the game, they picked up 3 fourth downs and also a 2-point conversion by short passing and just get the yards. And this was, I think they picked up 8 yards on the first down, and then they picked up 8 yards on second down. So they had a 3rd and 2 and then a 4th and 2, and they just couldn't get those 2 yards. And the fact that they were able to pick up the 4th down on the scoring drive just goes right back to, why are you faking the field goal? Franklin said after the game that they wanted to be aggressive. Then just be aggressive. Be aggressive with your offense. They're actually running the ball. You have the zone read that was in the draw and the QB run that was giving Michigan some issues, there were things that you could have done that would have punting from the 2, Tom, would have been better there, because then Michigan would have only gotten the ball at the 20 instead of, I think, the 29 like they did following that play. So many different choices. James Franklin, to no surprise, chose the absolute worst one. And you know how on all of our podcasts we talk about a true freshman quarterback loses you at least one game during a year. I wonder, if you go back, how many games per year does James Franklin lose Penn State that losses above replacement or below? Like what is the LAR of James Franklin?
You go losses above replacement dummy, and then it's lard. That's not bad. That's not a bad.
What's his lard?
Lard. Yeah. What is his lard? Yeah, that is. The one that, the one that you brought up there on the 4th and 2, where it was like a fade and it was to a receiver. I'm now blanking on the guy's name, but Cam Sullivan Brown.
Yep.
Where he had 5 catches all season, something like that, and it's like, this is the guy we're going to in the big moment. Now, Jahan Dotson had been hurt on the previous play, so he's not an option. But you're running a low percentage pass to a receiver who really has not been a part of the game plan at all much this game or this season. And that's your call on 4th and 2. Like, you can look at, long pass plays on 4th down like that. Sometimes that's a great call. That was rather famously worked out okay for Ohio State and at Purdue in 2002, but they were throwing to Michael Jenkins. They were not throwing to guy with 5 receptions or whatever the number is. It's just bizarre. It's like constantly they do like the 4th best thing you could do. And that might've been like more like the 6th best thing you could do. Like, I literally, there are 4 other eligible receivers out there on that play. Like, one of them, maybe consider one of them. Like, that's a thing you could do. I don't want to turn this into a Penn State conversation, but like, man, it is so consistent. And, sometimes coaches get reputations and they're not earned. Like, this has been years. And it's like, every time a game is close, he does something that's just like, what, why would you do that? Like, it was, 4th and 6 against Ohio State in 2019, 17. What year was that?
Yes.
Yeah. One of those. 17, I think.
Which one?
The 4th and 6, whatever year that was against Ohio State. No, that was 2018, because 19 and 17 were in Columbus. So 2018, that 4th and 6, where, they had the lead a bunch, they blow the lead, they get the ball back, it's 4th and 6, and it's like, they'll never suspect we'll run it. It's like, you're overthinking it. Just give one of your best players a chance to make the play, and don't completely overthink this. And just every time, it's just, it's the same basic thing. And I can't imagine how insane it must drive Penn State fans. Just know, like, it's like a baseball team with a bad bullpen. Even if you're winning late, it's like, oh no, something bad is about to happen. And then you watch whatever it is, you watch that bad thing happen, and it's just, that has to drive you nuts.
I wonder if they do have that feeling. And I haven't been on the Penn State boards enough to know if they view it as a James Franklin thing or if they just view it as a Big Ten refs thing. Like, I'm not sure which they choose. But to steer this back towards Michigan, because what I really liked on that final play, that 4th down play, is Michigan had everybody standing. So, like, Sean Clifford was trying to figure out where everybody was and what everybody was going to do. And the defensive line and everybody was just, standing at the line of scrimmage, ready to, looking like they were coming after the quarterback. So it was pretty hard for him to figure out exactly where to go. And maybe that's why he chose, like, the safest place was away from as many defenders as possible. Except that dude did not get off the line. Like, everybody was locked down. If you watch the play over, they send 5, all of the receivers get locked down. There's nowhere to throw. And so Michigan, not only did they kind of freak out Sean Clifford, they covered everybody as well. And they didn't let the one guy that was being thrown to off the line. That's another reason why the ball was overthrown. So really good job by the Michigan defense there. And I guess one thing this group can do is get after the quarterback. And we saw that throughout the game. 7 sacks, 3 sacks by Aiden Hutchinson, which was like a couple of half sacks and like two all by himself. So like 4 times he's bringing the quarterback down with somebody. David Ojabo, another 2 sacks, a forced fumble. Aiden Hutchinson had a forced fumble. Even Vincent Gray had a forced fumble, not on the quarterback though. But this was the absolute worst matchup for Penn State with their offensive tackles. This is, I don't know, it's like Heisman level versus JV level with Hutchinson and Ojabo against
Rasheed Walker
and Caden Wallace, perhaps is. I may be pulling that out of absolute nowhere, but we talked about it on yesterday's show where there was a graphic put up on the screen at one point that those two had combined to give up like 18 or 19 sacks through 9 games, which the fact that there's nobody better than those two at those 2 positions is it's astounding that they are still giving up that number of sacks. Although, to I guess their credit, they couldn't be blamed for all of them because, as I said, they let David Ojabo go completely scot-free on one of them. So who are you going to blame on that one? That's not my fault. I never even touched the guy.
Yeah, that was a pretty obviously like that probably is not how they drew that up. Like sometimes you will leave a free rusher, and that's actually part of the plan. Like the dude who's really good at getting to the quarterback, we're going to give him a free shot to the quarterback who's injured, and do it on a pass play where it's not like a real quick pass play. Like that's probably not how they drew that one up. That looked like maybe I am no Ross Fulton as a scheme expert, but that looked like maybe the tackle went inside a little earlier than he planned to, or maybe earlier than he should have. That was not a great choice by him. The Michigan defense is really good. They have certain things they are really good at. There's no team this year that is totally complete on both sides of the ball. There is not a team that is super fantastic on offense all the time, super fantastic on defense all the time, can run the ball, can throw the ball, can stop the run, can stop the pass. Like that team doesn't exist this year. There are a lot of teams, Ohio State is probably, you've got Georgia, which is kind of the consensus number 1, and there's probably a gap there. And then there's like Alabama and Ohio State, and Ohio State fans are constantly saying, "Well, I mean, how could this team be a national championship contender with all their problems?" It's like, look around you, man. Like someone has to play Georgia in the national championship game. Alabama just looked like absolute butt against LSU for an entire game at home, and then there's a drop off below those 2 teams down to the Michigans and Cincinnati's, and some of those other programs around there. Michigan is flawed. Michigan is not perfect. Michigan is probably not as good as Ohio State, but Michigan has some stuff that they do really well. They rush the passer really well. They run the ball pretty consistently, not fantastic. They have stuff that they do in the pass game that works well. They have stuff that they don't do in the pass game at all, like throw downfield. We've talked about that a bunch. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I saw, I still have questions on Michigan's corners and how they're going to hold up against Ohio State and 3 receivers like Ohio State has. But, going into last week, I thought, okay, I'm going to be really interested to see how they hold up against Jahan Dotson. And Jahan Dotson did not have a big game. He was targeted a bunch. He was targeted
16 times.
16 times. There we go. Sorry. I was looking at the quarter stats. I'm like, he wasn't targeted twice. That's not right. 16 times, 9 catches, 61 yards. That's great. That is, if you told me beforehand that was going to be what Jahan Dotson did, and that was all you told me, I would have said Michigan probably wins fairly comfortably. Some of that is pass rush. Some of that is Sean Clifford. But, some of that is just like there was some good coverage on Jahan Dotson. There was right before that 4th and 2 play, there was good coverage on Jahan Dotson. On the 3rd down, DJ Turner had a nice play on that one. DJ Turner had a really nice play on like a little slip screen right down by the goal line. I think that was 4th down. Jahan Dotson gets the ball in space. Looks like he's going to get in, and DJ Turner just makes a fantastic open field tackle to save a touchdown. Like that is a big time play. Again, let's see. We still haven't seen this team tested downfield really much this season, so let's see what that looks like when when they're playing Ohio State. Can they hold up there? But I feel like you're getting more and more answers on Michigan at this point. Like I finally feel like I sort of sort of believe in them in certain areas in a way that I didn't a couple weeks ago.
It's interesting you bring up DJ Turner because he gave up the touchdown to to tie, and he gave up the 2-point conversion to tie, and he was locked on both of those receivers. Those are just two really good plays by both of those guys. The 2-pointer going to Jahan Dotson, and the touchdown going to Tyler Warren. I think it was his second catch of the year or whatever. And DJ Turner was on both of those guys, and he's gotten impressive, stepping up in place of Jamon Green. I also saw quite a bit of Rod Moore, the freshman safety, playing for Michigan as their kind of nickel safety. Sometimes they're deep safety to the field, and that's maybe something to watch moving forward. It looks like he's moved ahead of RJ Moten, and maybe he will find himself matched up with, I don't know, say Jackson Smith and Jigba or something like that down the road in a little over a week. And so just know there's a true freshman in the secondary roaming around for Michigan, and maybe Ohio State will notice that. We'll see. And he's an Ohio kid, a guy that Bill Green was very high on, thought he was good enough to play at Ohio State. And it's interesting to see him already starting now. He started in this game because Michigan opened in the nickel, because you don't need 3 linebackers to stop the Penn State running game, which maybe is also why Penn State was able to run as much as they could, because they were more concerned with Jahan Dotson and stopping him, and they certainly did that. I mean, 61 yards on 9 catches. A lot of those were screens that they were tackling very well, and that's something that Michigan has been able to do. And that's not just been DJ Turner. Vincent Gray has had some really good tackles on screens. Jamon Green has as well. Daxton Hill, we all know. So, Tom, I don't know how many times we could say it. Go downfield, and then everybody else is saying, like, how? We don't have enough time to throw the ball. And you saw what happened. Penn State on that 4th and 2 at the end of the game tries to go downfield, but the timing is so off because you can't set. You have no idea how the get off is. You can't, you just have to hope things will work because you have no time. And so really the key is just, it's so simple, Tom. Just block the defensive ends and you're going to win. Come on. What's the problem here?
Yeah, it does kind of feel like that. Because it seems to me like if CJ Stroud has time, as he has for virtually all of the season, if CJ Stroud has time, he's going to be able to pick this defense apart downfield. Like that just seems like that is very, very likely to happen. If they can get pressure, and is that Hutchinson and Dejabo? Is that, do they have to bring a 5th guy? Do they have to bring a 6th guy? And that maybe that's the game plan, because you don't think you can you can cover downfield for that long. So you're constantly bringing a 5th guy from somewhere, and it's just, you're trying to be unpredictable and keep them. I mean, that's kind of been Mike McDonald's kind of thing all year. That's what I would expect if I was Ohio State going into that game. But how quickly does that guy, how often does that guy get there? How quickly how quickly is he there? Does CJ Stroud have 3 seconds, or does CJ Stroud have 4 seconds? That literally may be the difference between, does Ohio State score 24 points or 38 points or 42 points? And that's probably the difference between how, what are Ohio State fans' blood pressure like in the 4th quarter of that game? Because if it's if Michigan's going to win this game, they're going to win this game 24-21, 27-24, or does Ohio State end up bogging down in the red zone again and kicking a bunch of field goals, where instead of scoring 35 points, it's 2 touchdowns, but they've kicked 3 field goals, so it's 23 points, and then you lose 24-23. Like that's the kind of thing that, if Michigan's going to win that game, they probably need to keep it in the 20s. I don't think they're winning if it's 38-35, right? I mean, am I wrong there? Does it?
Well,
it seems like Michigan needs to keep it low.
Because this is what Penn State did. They threw the ball 43 times. They got sacked 7 times, so 50 dropbacks essentially.
Mm-hmm.
If Ohio State gets sacked 7 times but gets 43 passes off, they're still scoring more than 17 points. They're probably scoring, at the minimum, your 23 example of 5 scores. Penn State was inside, had reached Michigan's 25 5 times. They scored, what, 1 touchdown out of it, 2 touchdowns out of it, and a field goal. Like they were getting halfway there. And I feel like Ohio State will be more equipped to get all the way there, or at least enough field goals. Like if you give Ohio State 6 trips inside the 25 or whatever, and Michigan on their own, I think they had 3 drives. That's basically it. They moved the ball 3 times and scored every single time. They had drives of a 90-yard drive, the 50-yard drive that ended in downs, but a 75-yard drive and then a 75-yard drive. And it's like those 3 big drives were touchdowns. Everything else is a bunch of 3 and outs. And Penn State actually moved the ball more frequently, not as far, but I almost feel like Ohio State could put up the same 50 dropbacks, 7 sacks, and they would be fine. Now, what happens with those sacks? Are there 2 forced fumbles and a pick 6? I mean, like, where do the turnovers happen? I think Michigan will need that, some turnovers in their own side of the field on some forced fumbles, because I mean those 2 guys are awesome at that, and I think they would need that. But it feels like, based on this, Ohio State could survive 7 sacks and still win the game.
Yeah, and I don't think they're getting 7 sacks. I mean, that would be a lot. 7 sacks. 7 sacks. It would be one of those. If you see that, I think that's that would be a major concern for Ohio State, because you're also going to have. It is a young quarterback, and CJ Stroud has not always looked super comfortable on the road, and so if you get that eye level coming down where you're not looking downfield anymore, maybe that changes it. Where all of a sudden those downfield passes aren't there, and he's getting a little more jittery in the pocket and not letting those routes develop downfield. I don't think you're getting to 7 sacks against CJ Stroud, though. I think if I set an over-under of 3.5 sacks for Michigan against Ohio State, where are you going?
I'm probably going over. I feel like this is a 4-sack game where, because it's going to happen, and I feel like there'll be a drive where they get 2-on-1, and it's like 2 drive killers where maybe they overcome one but can't overcome the second, that sort of thing, and then just 2 throughout the rest of the game seems like a shoe-in for me. So I would go over 3.5, and if it's under, that's not good for Michigan.
Right. If it's under 3.5, or if TreVeyon Henderson has a 100-yard game on the ground, like either of those, I think tells me Ohio State's probably having a decent day, at least a solid day on offense, where it's probably you're getting to either of those is true. You're probably getting to 30, which gives you a pretty good chance to win, I think. On the other side of the ball, one of the things that we had, I think we've harped on quite a bit is the lack of receiving talent for Michigan with Ronnie Bell out. It feels like they're kind of starting to answer some of those questions a little bit. I mean, you had, Roman Wilson, he scored 2 touchdowns. He only had 3 catches all game, and it was on 7 targets. It wasn't like he was fantastic, but it's like they're getting some answers there. Cornelius Johnson, he's not going to put up 180 yards on you. He's not going to put up 15 catches on you, but he's good for a couple plays a game. Eric All had the one, I don't know that Eric All is the guy that's going to be winning the Michigan-Ohio State game for them, that you're going to really be able to lean on the tight end there. But, it's like you sort of are seeing some guys in that passing game where it's like they're finally having some people step up. Andrew Anthony obviously had the monster game against Michigan State, and then 1 catch for 13 yards against Penn State. But it's like, if you see this from guys, and you have, a big game here, a big game there from different guys, it's like, okay, they do have some guys who can make plays. It's not, this is, I'm not going to insult anyone by saying that any of Michigan's wide receivers would crack the top 4 for Ohio State's roster right now, but they have a solid receiving core. Cade McNamara was efficient. I mean, he was okay. Didn't throw any picks. If they get, if they have the game they had against Penn State, if Hassan Haskins runs for 5 yards a carry, Cade McNamara throws 0 interceptions, they get, we'll just use the number, although they get 4 sacks against Ohio State. And that's all I tell you. What is your prediction of a final score?
Based on this, I would say something in the range of like 38-20 Ohio State. Like I don't feel like this is enough. Uh, One of the things where Ohio State struggles is the intermediate pass defense. Michigan needs to target that. They would need to
Mm-hmm.
target that. It's not something they. Although Cade McNamara's best throw of the day was the 24-yard touch or the 21-yard touchdown to Roman Wilson on the skinny post.
Mm-hmm.
Where, and again, keep in mind Wilson has a cast on his left arm, and so he's like one and a half handed. That was by far McNamara's best throw, Tom. So I went ahead and I charted the distance that his passes went downfield again, because sometimes I like to do that. On passes that so he was 19 of 29 on the day. On passes that went further than 5 yards downfield in this game, he was 5 of 12. Everything else, 5 yards and under, 14 of 17.
Mm-hmm.
Downfield, past 5 yards, completing 5 of 12 passes. And so, I mean, that's who they're dealing with. And that's further than 5 yards is where Ohio State's defense struggles a little bit. Like, I think they can tackle well enough. If you want to throw, all of these quick hitters and things like that, I think Ohio State will be fine. Eventually, you'll bog down and there'll be a play that doesn't work. But really, I think McNamara needs to, or Michigan, whoever the quarterback, and certainly at this point, it looks like it's going to be McNamara, will have to go like beyond the linebackers and attack the safeties, because that's where Ohio State has been weakest with their pass defense. And I'm not saying he can't do that. I'm saying they will have to change what they do a little bit in order to do that. And then also complete those passes, because he threw some errant passes when he tried to go further down the field. Passes of over 20 yards. He was 1 of 5. Passes of over 15 yards, I think he was 1 of 6. And the lone completion was the touchdown, his best pass of the day, which at this point looks like an outlier.
And, he had a couple passes batted down too. That was, that was, and Penn State's defensive front is not anything spectacular. So yeah, that was, I think, a little concerning to me as well. There was, was it the first drive where he hit, was it Vastardis in the back of the head? Just threw an absolute laser and went right off of Vastardis' head, went straight up in the air, looked like it hung there for about, it was like one of those, like the movie about the kid playing Little League, and then he's in the outfield and the ball's up in the air, and you can just, you hear the narrator and voicing the kid's head going, "Oh no, they hit it to me. Oh no, what do I do? Oh no." And it's hanging up in the air for like 30 seconds. That's what that ball felt like. It was like up in the air, and there were like 6 Penn State guys within 3-4 yards of it, and no one caught it. But yeah, it was, there's still concerns with McNamara. I do wonder if that was somewhat a function of the front of Penn State's defense is not as good as the back 7 of Penn State's defense. So maybe, you're trying to do a little shorter stuff, but they've done it so consistently that, maybe this is the long con where they're just doing this and doing this and doing this, and they're going to completely change it up for Ohio State. But you're right. I don't think what they did against Penn State offensively, especially in the pass game, is what they're going to want to do against Ohio State. Now, can they do what they're going to want to do against Ohio State? Maybe, but we haven't really seen it with any kind of consistency this year.
Yeah, the consistency, and I assume there would be more pass rush coming at them as well. Anything else that you wanted to touch on, Tom, from this game? I know freshman linebacker Junior Colson led the Wolverines. My apologies, with 12 tackles. This with Josh Ross, another 11. But the defensive line didn't see much from the defensive tackles in this one. I guess maybe a little bit of a disappointment there, but. Any other thoughts on what you saw or what we may see down the road?
I guess, how many days this week do you think Michigan is working on Ohio State? They're playing Maryland this weekend. Maryland should not give them a problem, right? Maryland has kind of fallen apart after a good start against soft competition. How many days this week are they working on stuff that they're probably planning on using in the Ohio State game and not against Maryland?
You would hope at least like one, and then stuff that you can. Like it sort of prepares for Maryland, or pass defense type things. And, but yeah, offensively, go ahead and do stuff that use this as not a bye week, but use this as just more preparation. I don't know. Are you thinking like all week. I mean,
Well, I think it would not surprise me if they went in. I mean, Maryland's defense is not quite what Ohio State's defense is, but it wouldn't surprise me if you're putting in stuff with the idea that you're hoping to save it for Ohio State, but maybe if you need to break glass in case of emergency, use it against Maryland. But yeah, I mean, Michigan is definitely taking the Ohio State game seriously. Like they have that sign up in their facility now about what did you do to beat Ohio State today, and Harbaugh has for a number of years kind of ignored it and acted like it wasn't a thing, and now they're kind of taking the opposite approach. So, that makes me wonder, how much are they doing it? They're not going to do what Ohio State does and have the team up north period every day and all that kind of stuff. But you were talking, I was just thinking about that. Like Ohio State has a much tougher game this weekend than Michigan does. So, what is that going to mean in terms of game prep for the game in 2 weeks?
Like you could do what you want offensively next week. Try that this weekend. Like it's Larry Johnson's approach to stopping the run. It's like, just go get the quarterback. And if you see the ball with the running backs on the way to the quarterback, tackle that guy as well. It's just like, while you're doing this, just go ahead and beat Maryland as well with this game plan and see how that goes. But I think I'm actually looking forward to that one. I don't know if Taulia Tagovailoa is going to finish that game. He is going to be harassed.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going to be trying to put David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson on the do not call list, but they're going to get around it. They're going to robocall, and there's going to be no stopping them. And they may have another 5 sacks between them next week if the game lasts that long in terms of being in doubt that long. They may only play a half, and then if they have backups, I don't know if they do or not. They do. We just don't get to see much of them. Maybe we will on Saturday. So that will do it for this episode of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, our Michigan Monday weekly special for you. I want to thank you all for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the bell there and subscribe, be notified when we drop something live or drop something recorded like this one. Or if you want to listen to the audio version, just go to any podcast platform, search Buckeye Weekly Podcast, and you'll find us there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.